One of many, many, many amazing songs on those two albums from Piper, written by Billy Squier, who is here in the studio with me. And as Billy said earlier, as we start in the beginning of his career, that's kind of where you really felt like you kind of came into your own as a singer. Is it really vocally? Is that what it was really about there?
Well, that with that song, that was the thing. Yeah, I particularly liked where I was at on that.
Right. But, and the songwriting process for you, you've always been one of my favorite songwriters across the board, and I've always felt some of your best songs weren't necessarily the quote unquote hits. You know, I always felt that people really dug in your catalog and listened to some of the things that didn't get all the airplay. There's some genius lyrics and songs in there as well. Was songwriting something that always came very easy to you?
No, not at all.
No.
That was the last, what should I say? Obstacle or hurdle, whatever. I started out as a guitar player. When I was a kid, I was at the age where I was bit by the Beatles and the Stones when they came out. I was, just getting into teenage years when they came out. And so I was very much into that sort of pop rock thing out of England. Beatles, Stones, The Who,
right?
Kinks, stuff like that.
Not unusual. Pretty much all the stuff the most American rock guys were into.
And I was playing. So I'd play in a band, and I would play all those songs and throw in an Animal song, and the usual stuff. And then 66, maybe 66, 67, Magic Terry, who I went to high school with, who was not Magic Terry yet, but he was one of my chums, and he was a poet, and he went to England for the summer, and he brought back a record called John Mayall and the Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton. And that's the record that changed my life, because when I put the needle, dropped that on Key to Love, I'd never heard guitar like this. No one had. I mean, Clapton just completely redirected the electric guitar, in my opinion, with that record. It was just brilliant, and I was completely hooked. So that was my goal. I want to be a guitar player. Then as it went along, because I've always could sing, and I like to sing, so I had the ability to sing, but I was not focused on that. Going through a few bands, I alluded to this before, when I felt that perhaps I could do a better job handling the vocals than
some of the people
in the band,
right?
So I then got out of the Sidewinders, which was about 1974, and started trying to be a singer. I mean, actually, I'd sitting in my apartment. There was an opera singer who lived across the hall, and I got one lesson. I went to him one day and said, "Tell me something about singing." He said, "It's all breath control." And he taught me how to breathe one day. He said, "You got to breathe from down," and I've got my hands on my hips now. He said, "You got to breathe, your bass is down here, you breathe from there, and you keep that, and then you want to project the sound so that it should never come from your throat. Picture it come across the room, whatever you can do, but you want to take the stress off your vocal cords, support your diaphragm with this, air cushion, and project your voice." Okay, I'll do it. So I would go home, across the hall, and I would hear him, because every day he'd get up and be going, "Oh,"
right.
So I'm like,
okay,
I'll do that. So I would do this. I would get up and I would do it to try to start creating a range, trying to expand my range, because the singers I liked were all guys who were singing all over the place. Paul Rodgers, Rod Stewart, McCartney. I mean, these guys could really, could just hit anything they wanted. Mm-hmm. So I said, I got to get my range together. So I, started doing that, and then I would be. The last piece, I would sit down to try to write songs, because what am I going to do if you play guitar or you play an instrument and you sing? You got to have some music to do.
Well, and I've always said, Billy, that I feel, and when people ask me all the time about being in bands and I'm not making it and I can't get there and what do I need to do, I feel that there are tons of great guitar players on this planet. There are tons of great singers and all kinds of musicians on this planet. To me, the real deal breaker, the one that really, I think, in a talent area sets you apart and gives you that edge, and the talent that really most impresses me is the ability to write songs. And I don't think there are as many great songwriters as there are great musicians out there.
Probably true.
So that's what made you,
Probably
I think,
true.
the total package, and that you started as a guitar player, you mastered your craft as a singer, but the songwriting thing is really what came last for you, huh?
Yeah, and it came last, and it was an ongoing process. I think the hardest part about songwriting, I would say for me, is the lyrics. And I appreciate what you said about my lyrics because they mean a lot to me, and I spend a lot of time on them. But it's hard. How do you learn to write lyrics? You know what I mean? And really find your voice and find a particular way of expressing yourself that somehow sets you apart. And that was something that, I was just picking my way. I was just doing the best I can and listening to people who I thought were great writers. But, you can't really copy John Lennon.
Right.
You can sort of learn or sense his sensitivity or his intensity or how he turned a phrase. But, you can't really, it's hard to kind of rip it off.
And you change.
You got to find your own way to do something that where you as I said, you kind of find your voice, and that took a while. I don't think that I had found my voice in Piper. I was getting closer, but you can hear, you can hear the Stones' influence, and you can hear me even like maybe at some of it I'm singing a little like Mick, or you mentioned "Sail Away," and that that's like Layla to me. I mean, not the song Layla, but there's one of the songs, Any Day from it's. I mean, it was still.
But Sail Away has that kind of Layla-esque type of guitar harmony part in it too.
Yeah. It was. I'm just saying that it was still at that time, somewhat derivative.
Right.
Which I think we do. It's until we find our way. You are borrowing and imitating and putting it, and then you keep trying to somehow. I didn't have a magic formula, which I suddenly went, "Oh, this is how I do it to be Billy Squier." It just came eventually.
But it's a point in your life too, because clearly, when we're talking Piper and your earliest records, you're a younger man. You have different goals, you have different dreams, you have different things, people around you, relationships, whatever the case may be. So your point of reference of what you're exposed to as a songwriter and a lyricist would be different as you, I would imagine, you're a songwriter, so you would know, but as you grow and get older and change and are exposed to different things, that palette that you're working from kind of evolves to some degree.
Yeah, it always does, just like life.
Right.
I mean, basically, that's what artists do, I think. I think that we're in some way representing or mirroring what goes on. And I think Lennon said that, so maybe I'm stealing something from him again. But I think that, we do. We reflect what's going on, for better or for worse. Because we are drawing, generally, our source material is what goes on around us.
What was and we'll move from Piper in a second, and we'll get into you officially as a solo artist. But before we do that, one last thing on Piper. What was going on in your life at the time of making the Piper records? Because I played Piper one time for a good friend of mine, and they were listening to it. They were listening to some of the songs, and they said, this guy must have been in some bad breakups, because there's some lyrics on Piper, that the Piper albums, that are like, kind of some shots. It sounds like some shots at some people, like, a little bit,
No,
like,
it's actually
like you were jilted a little bit.
It's actually not true. It's actually, I think that was working with themes which are, fairly traditional themes, which I think you do pick up in the rock and roll genre. It's so much stuff about falling in love, and bad relationships, good relationships, being on the road,
But the Piper albums aren't like,
I
love you, throwing flowers at people. There was some biting stuff in there.
I think that reflects an overall outlook which has kind of been present to a great extent throughout my writing career, which is that I don't write about happy stuff. And I think the reason is because when I'm happy, I'm enjoying my life. When am I sitting around writing about it? I don't.
Right.
So I'm usually writing when it's something that affects me in a deep way, which is not to say that you can't be profoundly happy. But most of the stuff I write about is going to be more, on the dark side.
And it's probably one of the reasons why
it's not Black Sabbath, but
exactly.
No, but it's contemplative, and it's it's deep in the way that I am usually wrestling with a conflict or a point of confusion or that needs resolution and things like that.
And it's probably one of the biggest reasons why I love your song so much, because when you write like that, there's an emotion in the music. All the your albums, to me, contain so much emotion in the lyrics and the delivery and everything about them. And that's another component of what I've loved so much about your career. So maybe it is when you go into that subject matter, whatever it is that moves you to write it, it brings it more conviction when you put it down on tape.
Yeah, it's very real.
Yeah, it's very real. It's very, very real.
But the first Piper record, it wasn't really about a bad breakup. I can't say that. I had relationships and breakups, but it's not. I wouldn't want any of those people who were involved with me at that time to think, "Oh my God, he's writing that about me," because that was not the point.
I mean, I'm just thinking of it for people that don't know. I mean, I remember playing this for a friend of mine. The first song, "Out of Control." It's just like, when all your worthless dreams come true, who'll be there to stand by you. It's just like, it's a great thing to listen to if you do just go through a breakup, man, because you crank that with the windows down and start screaming at someone. It does the trick. Yeah. It really does. Billy Squier is my guest. It's Eddie Trunk live here on Sirius XM. Billy's 30th anniversary of his breakthrough album, which we're going to get to in just a second. Don't Say No. The 30th anniversary edition is in stores now. We'll cover that in 1 second, but there is what I feel a very important bridge from Piper to Don't Say No that I want to bring up, and that is what was your first solo album, which was released in 1980, The Tale of the Tape, which is now, there's a great label in England run by a friend of mine there, Dante Benuto and Derek Oliver, both of them, doing tremendous jobs reissuing some albums that have been out of print on CD, and they just did a great sounding version of Tale of the Tape. So I've been revisiting and falling in love with this record all over again. Tell me about moving from Piper to saying, okay, I'm taking it all on my shoulders. This thing's just going to be branded Billy Squier.
Okay.
New record deal, new everything.
First of all, though, I have to say that the package that they did, the Rock Candy did for that reissue is spectacular.
It is, and it's the liner notes. Everything
is really great. And John Astley, who I subsequently got to remaster Don't Say No, did Tale of the Tape as well, and that's why I went to him to do this second one, because he did a really great job.
This is the album, for folks listening, that preceded Don't Say No, so it wasn't the breakthrough album, but to me, again, brilliant songs top to bottom. Your thoughts about this and where you were at, striking out on your own?
Well, it was my first real solo record, and I don't know what to say. I mean, I like it very much. I felt that it was absolutely another big step on the road to Don't Say No. The songs, for the most part, I think were evolving. We hate to use the word mature in rock and roll, but I was upping my game a bit. I got very good players. It's where I met Bobby Chenard, who was became my drummer for many years, who we all affectionately look at as the poor man's John Bonham, which is meant as an extremely high compliment.
Yep, giant kick drum and
Mr. Big Feet himself. Yep. Yeah, Bobby's on that record. Good players.
Bruce Kulick, who of course later went on to be a member of Kiss.
Bruce was in it. David Sanchez from the E Street Band played keyboards. I got a good bunch of people together. I wrote some good songs. Recorded it up at Levon's house in Woodstock with a guy named Eddie Offord, who was an engineer. He did the Yes records and ELP and things like that. Who, again, is somewhat of an unlikely candidate, but I had him recommended to me through someone who knew what I was doing, and it worked out very well. So I, learned a lot from Eddie about the studio, and then I'm very happy with that record. It's not Don't Say No, but I'm very happy with it. It's a good record. And there's some really cool stuff on it.
Did you feel that this album has a song on it that has since been sampled a million ways to Sunday, from what I understand.
Most sampled song in history.
The Big Beat.
Yeah, Big Beat.
Which is the opening track on the record. And it's been sampled by hip-hop artists, correct?
If you haven't done it, You better do it because you need this. You need to have this in your repertoire.
Now Jay-Z used it, right?
Jay-Z did. Yeah, Jay-Z and Rick Rubin did 99 Problems using that. And they did an incredible job with it.
Now, how did it come to be? Because The Tale of the Tape was not a breakthrough album. It was not an overly successful album. It didn't really have a signature hit on it. How did it come to be that what is relatively an obscure record in your catalog, your first solo record, how did it come into awareness that these hip-hop guys discover this song?
It's a good question, and I don't know. I don't know a lot of these guys. I know some of them. Sometimes, I bump into them. I know them a bit, but I've never really gone and asked anybody who was the first guy to do it. I know Run DMC found it. I think what happened. I mean, for one thing, these guys who were spinning were just picking up records and listening to them, and how they got. Someone heard Tale of the Tape. I don't know how, but once they did, it started getting. It was played a lot. I know in the clubs and things like that, and it's one of those things. It became this massive cult thing, and Run before Run did Walk This Way, which was the big sort of crossover breakthrough with with them and Aerosmith. They did a song on the record before that, and again, I may mix this up a little bit. I think it was their first record.
I won't be able to correct you because I don't know the hip-hop world at all.
I may mess this up, but I'll be close. They did a song, I think it was called Here We Go, which was a big record in the black community or the hip-hop community. I don't want to speak incorrectly in the days of political correctness.
Yeah, I know. Right.
But they know where I'm coming from.
Right.
We're all cool. It was a very big record then. So I mean, they had used me before they used the Aerosmith song. So it was out there. And then subsequently, as it started building, people just kept using it, and they still use it. People, Jay did it, but it's used all the time. It is. One day, 5 years or so ago, someone said to me, "It's the biggest sampled song in history." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" And he said, "Because Kurt Loder just said it on MTV." And they did a research thing, and they said, This is it. They announced it officially. So
now, as the songwriter, do you have to get paid when they sample it? Right?
Of course, I do.
I was going to, but isn't there somewhere where they can only use a certain amount of bars without paying? I had heard, like in other words, you can use up to a certain point without having to pay.
Yeah, I think it's changed though. They've it used to be, I think, with song melodies, it used to be 7 notes. I think, but with the beat, I'm not sure. And they're actually using. They're using the master because they want the sound.
Right.
Anyone can play the beat.
Right.
So you can't get the sound.
Right. Right. It's amazing. And the other thing that's significant about The Tale of the Tape, Billy's first solo album, well, a couple quick things. Number one, first time you had an outside writer, to my knowledge, on there where you did a track with a guy who would go on to co-write songs with so many bands, have enormous success with Bon Jovi and Kiss and Aerosmith and Alice Cooper. I'm talking about Desmond Child, who this is one of the earliest rock records, I think, that Desmond turned up on. The year prior to this, he co-wrote I Was Made for Lovin' You with Kiss.
Right.
But this was, really the infancy, I think, of Desmond as a rock songwriter.
Just before he got slick. Slick and formulaic, he was not at this time. So no, we had a good collaboration.
Yeah,
that's a good song. That song was actually, as I recall, was "You Should Be High Love" was the number one requested song on rock radio for 2 months.
Really?
Yeah, when it came out.
And the last.
So that was a big indicator to me. That's kind of what propelled me into Don't Say No. I was on the radio, and I was at the top of every request list for a long time.
So the stage was set.
Yeah, so I knew something. People knew me.
Right.
Put it that way. That this is the first time that people in that medium, which is what I depended on to get to get out. I was on the radar now. So they were waiting. Let's see what the next record. When Don't Say No came out, people were going to listen to it to see what was on there, and of course. It didn't let up from start to finish. So that week it was like setting him up.
Right.
Fortunately, it wasn't anything I planned that way, but it worked out. I think that was kind of the effect.
And the last thing on The Tale of the Tape before we move on, that I always wanted to ask you is you actually re-recorded one of your old songs with the tail of the tape from the Piper days. You took a second swing at the song "Who's Your Boyfriend" on this record. Tell me about that decision.
No, "Who's Your Boyfriend" was one of those bubbling under pop singles. Got a lot of airplay. A lot of people heard it
with Piper.
Yeah, with Piper. Critics liked it a lot. It was kind of in the, I would say, kind of in the big star mold. Big Star being also a band like that, which critics love and revered by people who discover them, but don't sell any records. Where they had no commercial success. But it was kind of like that. And in fact, I had met Alex back in those days and loaned him some equipment. His Big Star came to town and had their equipment stolen or something, and somehow got in touch with me, and I helped him out. So we had a little history there. But I decided when I was going to do the solo thing that maybe that would be a good transitional song because some people might know it, some people in radio and whatever, so that I would try to take it. They might drop the needle on it because they see it, and then I would try to do it in a version that was more in line with what I was doing then. So that was my plan.
Well, it's a totally different take on the song. Obviously, it's a little shorter, a little more direct. I think a little edgier.
Yeah, it rocks a little more.
Yeah, a little bit more. But I mean, I love both versions. It's kind of hard to pick.
Well, as I said, I was using that. That was calculated. I was trying to use that to steer people or give people an indication of the direction I was going in. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than the original. It's very different from the original. The original is kind of more of a pop thing.
Right.
And on Tail of the Tape, I'm obviously getting harder. I'm trying to go, I'm trying to put down my rock credibility a bit.
Right.
I'm trying to stamp that out, And when I started as a solo artist, I started consciously trying to frame my work a little more, which we can talk about when we get to Don't Say No, because that's, I think, was the key to Don't Say No, was not trying to write everything.
Right.
Figure out what it is you want. What do you really want to sound like? What do you really want to say? And then cut out the extra stuff. You could have great stuff, but it might be outside of the parameters of what's going to really hang together.
Right.
And I was starting to do that on this record.
We're going to, of course, then, now move to where it all blew up for Billy in a good way with Don't Say No. But before we do, I'd like to play something from Tail of the Tape for people, because, again, I think it's an important record people don't hear a lot, and I'd like people to hear. I think it's important to show where you were on the doorstep of what was about to happen in the next year with this, your first solo record.
Okay.
You got a track from here you'd like people to hear?
Well, there's a bunch of stuff I like on it, but we talked a little bit before about how, sometimes the hits end up obscuring some of the other great tracks. But in this case, since we're talking history, I would say maybe, we should play You Should Be High Love, because that's what people heard then. High Love was a pivotal song off of that record. So I think in terms of our discussion, we're not here necessarily to hit people to all the stuff they don't know. This, I think, again, it kind of keeps things in the parameters of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I could dig into so much. We talked a lot about the big beat and that significance, how that is now. But I just want to give people a taste of this stuff. Yeah, clearly we're not gonna chart Tail of the Tape 30 years after it came out, although that would be nice. But if somebody hears this and says, "Hey, that's cool. I didn't know there was a Billy Squier before In the Dark or The Stroke," this is the stuff that came before it. So
don't play it yet, because I have a little. I'm going to do a very, very quick thing.
Please do.
When you listen to the beginning of this song, before the band comes in, you will hear all the guitars backwards. Where it sounds like what a backwards sound. It starts and kind of creeps up on you and then rolls over. But we couldn't play the whole thing backwards. So what we literally did, Eddie and I recorded the intro. It's just me playing guitar. We took it was reel tape those days, and we took the tape off the reel and we cut every chord. So every whatever it was, 1.5 foot or 2, whatever it was, we cut, and Eddie Swit turned every piece of tape around.
Eddie's your producer.
Eddie offered it,
right,
and spliced them all back together again. So every one of those,
in
the first, you count the number of chords, and that's how many edits there are before the band comes in. So every time it goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, every one is this process where the record was done, and then we cut the whole
Right.
thing up and turned everything over and put it. And those are fun things that you do in the studio.
Right.
How are we going to do this? He goes, well, I think if we cut them all and turn them around, it'll work. Okay, let's do it.
Right, long before the days of Pro Tools and just sitting in your computer and doing
That's
all
right.
that.
No, this is really hands-on stuff.
And you can see the tape on the album cover. I don't know if that's the actual tape, but Billy on the album cover is surrounded by open reel tape on the floor.
That's the story.
All right, let's do it. This is from Billy's first solo album, 1980, The Tale of the Tape, You Should Be High Love, co-written by Desmond Child in his infancy as a rock songwriter as well. And then this sets the stage when we come back from the song for the world to discover Billy Squier and everything to go through the roof with an album called Don't Say No, which we'll talk about right after we give you a little taste of The Tale of the Tape. It's Eddie Trunk Live, Sirius XM, The Boneyard. Billy Squier is here in the studio. More with him after another brilliant song from his career.